attitude that I stand before you.
Zambia President
today
demands billions back after EU-UK visa insult. Joins Traoré. EU rejected his visa. Now Zambia's president wants payback for Africa. Zambia just called out Europe's hypocrisy. Traoré joins the fight. Africa fights back. Zambia's leader demands billions after EU snub. They denied him a visa. Now he's uniting with Traoré to shake the West. Zambia's president fires back at EU-UK. Visa rejection sparks continental uprising. You rejected me? Pay Africa back. Zambia's president joins Traoré in bold move. Visa denied, dignity defended. Zambia strikes back with Traoré. Zambia president to EU, refund what you owe Africa, joins Revolutionary Alliance. The West said no, Zambia's president says pay up. Breaking news, Zambia's president has issued a bold and unprecedented demand for billions in refunds after being denied a visa by the EU and UK. What began as an act of diplomatic disrespect has now ignited a massive political shift. Zambia is officially aligning with Captain Ibrahim Traoré and Africa's movement towards sovereignty, unity, and economic independence. In this video, we dive deep into the full story behind the visa rejection scandal, why the Zambian president is demanding financial compensation, how this move is shaking up the European Union, the UK, and global powers, what this means for the future of African unity and Pan-Africanism, the rising influence of Captain Ibrahim Traoré and the leaders rejecting Western pressure. This is not just about one man, it's about a continent reclaiming its power. Africa is rising, and the world is watching. The full story behind the visa rejection scandal. The visa rejection scandal refers to the significant financial losses African applicants face due to non-refundable Schengen visa fees, with African countries losing an estimated €60 million, $67.5 million, in 2024 alone, according to the Lego Collective, a London-based research organization. This issue highlights systemic inequities in global mobility, where African applicants face disproportionately high rejection rates compared to global averages, exacerbating economic and social disparities. Key details of the scandal: scale of financial loss. In 2024, African applicants paid approximately $67.5 million in non-refundable Schengen visa fees, with countries like Cameroon losing $2.5 million alone. The Schengen visa fee increased from €80 to €90 in July 2024, further burdening applicants from poorer nations. High rejection rates. African Schengen visa applications faced a 30% rejection rate in 2022, nearly twice the global average of 17.5%. Countries like Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal saw rejection rates of 40 to 50%, compared to 4% for the US, Canada, or the UK. These rates correlate with low GDP per capita and weak passport power, as measured by the Henley Passport Index. Inconsistent decisions. Applicants report baffling and inconsistent visa denials. For example, Cameroonian Jean Bull, a permanent resident of South Africa, was denied a Schengen visa despite providing extensive documentation, while his unemployed wife with a South African passport was approved using his financial statements. Bull won a legal challenge in France, securing a visa and a €1,200 fine, but most applicants lack the resources to appeal. Systemic bias claims. The Lego Collective's founder, Marta Foresti, describes the visa system as having inbuilt discrimination and bias, labeling the fees as reverse remittances flowing from poor to rich countries. African applicants face stringent scrutiny over their intention to return, often based on economic status or nationality, despite no evidence that high rejection rates reduce irregular migration. Impact on applicants. The financial and emotional toll is significant. Nigerian consultant Joel Enyagbu faced repeated rejections, losing money and business opportunities, while Ugandan engineer Julius Muzaminta's family was denied visas despite a history of international travel. These cases highlight a perception that European embassies view African applicants with suspicion. Underlying causes. Historical patterns. Some argue rejections stem from past visa overstays, which shape stricter vetting processes. South African lecturer Sikambuzo Maisila suggests that violations by some applicants impact others, though he notes rejection rates are lower than expected. Economic disparities. The correlation between low GDP, low passport power, and high rejection rates suggests a structural bias, where poorer nations face greater barriers to mobility. Colonial legacy. The visa system reflects historical power imbalances, with European nations benefiting financially from African applicants while offering minimal reciprocity, e.g., visa-free access for Europeans to many African countries. The scandal has sparked outrage, amplified by social media and African leaders, framing it as a form of economic exploitation and a barrier to equitable global engagement. Why the Zambian president is demanding financial compensation. Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema has emerged as a vocal critic of the Schengen and UK visa systems, demanding refunds for rejected African applicants. His stance, highlighted in a YouTube report and X posts, frames the issue as a matter of economic justice and fairness in global mobility. Reasons for Hichilema's demand: economic exploitation. Hichilema argues that charging non-refundable fees for rejected visas is unjust, as applicants pay regardless of outcome. The $67.5 million lost by African applicants in 2024 is seen as a hidden tax on African mobility, with fees flowing from poorer to richer nations. Cameroonian expert Dr. Emile Tagny calls it an unfair financial burden. Principle of fairness. Hichilema contends that fees should only be levied when visas are granted, not when applications are rejected without clear justification. This stance resonates with African civil society, which views the system as punitive. Reciprocity concerns. Many African countries, including Cameroon, offer visa-free or visa-on-arrival access to European citizens, yet their citizens face costly barriers to Europe. Hichilema's call for refunds is part of a broader push for reciprocal treatment. Precedent for action. The case of Jean Bull, who won a €1,200 fine from France after a wrongful rejection, demonstrates that legal challenges can yield compensation. Hichilema's demand extends this principle to a continental scale, advocating for systemic change. Political momentum. Inspired by leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, Hichilema's stance aligns with a growing African assertiveness against perceived Western exploitation. His leadership on this issue positions Zambia as a champion of African interests. Context and motivation. Hichilema's demand reflects domestic and regional pressures. Zambia, like many African nations, faces economic challenges, and the visa issue resonates with citizens frustrated by global inequities. By taking a bold stand, Hichilema boosts his domestic popularity and aligns with the Pan-African movement, echoing Traoré's rejection of Western dominance. The demand also aims to pressure global powers into reforming visa policies, potentially at the African Union level. Challenges. Resistance from Europe. The EU maintains that visa decisions are case by case, citing concerns about overstays, and may resist refund policies as a financial loss for embassies. Implementation. Refunding fees continent-wide requires coordinated policy changes, which may face bureaucratic and diplomatic hurdles. Limited precedent. While Mbule's case succeeded, scaling individual appeals to a systemic refund policy is complex and unprecedented. Hichilema's demand is a call for economic justice, leveraging the visa scandal to challenge global power dynamics and advocate for African dignity. How this move is shaking up the European Union, the UK, and global powers. Hichilema's demand for visa fee refunds, combined with the broader visa rejection scandal, is creating diplomatic and geopolitical ripples, challenging the EU, UK, and other global powers. While direct responses from these entities are limited in available sources, the issue's implications can be inferred from its alignment with African assertiveness and shifting global alliances. Impact on the European Union. Reputation damage. The EU's visa policy is criticized as discriminatory, undermining its stated commitment to Africa as a priority partner. With 11 of the world's 20 fastest-growing economies in Africa, the EU risks alienating a key region by maintaining restrictive policies. Soft power erosion. High rejection rates and financial losses damage the EU's image among African elites, who view the policy as hypocritical given Europe's colonial ties and rhetoric of partnership. The Center for European Reform suggests reforming the Schengen system to boost EU soft power. Diplomatic pressure. Hichilema's demand, backed by civil society and potentially the African Union, pressures the EU to address visa fairness. The EU's response, that decisions are case by case, may be seen as inadequate, risking further tension. Comparison with competitors. China and regional powers like Iran and Indonesia offer cheaper or easier visas, enhancing their appeal in Africa. The EU risks losing influence to these rivals if it doesn't reform. Impact on the UK. Financial critique. African applicants lost an estimated £50 million, $65 million, to UK visa rejections in 2024, amplifying calls for reform. The UK's visa system, with only 3 processing hubs for Africa, is seen as opaque and discriminatory. Historical sensitivities. The UK's colonial legacy in Africa makes its visa policies a flashpoint. Hichilema's demand resonates with calls for reparative justice, as seen in Ghana's push for slavery reparations. Parliamentary scrutiny. UK visa refusals have raised concerns in Parliament, with the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Africa noting that African visitors are twice as likely to be rejected. This could push the UK to review its processes to maintain influence in Africa. Impact on global powers, US and Western allies. The US, while not directly implicated, faces scrutiny for its role in global mobility disparities. Its support for allies like Ivory Coast, accused of plotting against Traoré, ties into broader tensions over African sovereignty. Russia and China. These powers capitalize on African frustration with Western visa policies. Russia promotes Traoré's anti-imperialist image, while China's lower visa fees attract African travelers. Hichilema's stance aligns with this shift toward non-Western alliances. Geopolitical realignment. The visa issue fuels Africa's pivot toward powers offering fewer barriers, challenging the West's dominance. The Sahel Alliance's rejection of ECOWAS reflects this broader trend. Global reactions. Direct responses from global powers are limited, but France's Emmanuel Macron has criticized Traoré's alliances as baroque, reflecting Western unease with Africa's assertiveness. The EU and UK face pressure to reform to maintain trade and security partnerships, but entrenched policies and migration fears may delay action. This move is shaking up global powers by exposing mobility inequities, amplifying African demands for fairness, and accelerating a geopolitical shift toward non-Western alliances. What this means for the future of African unity and Pan-Africanism. The visa rejection scandal and Hichilema's demand for refunds are galvanizing African unity and reinvigorating Pan-Africanism, a movement advocating solidarity among African peoples and diasporas to overcome colonial legacies and assert global influence. Implications for African unity. Collective advocacy. Hichilema's call for refunds, potentially escalating to the African Union, fosters continent-wide collaboration. Proposals for reciprocal visa fees, e.g., Cameroon charging Europeans, signal a unified push for equitable treatment. Regional integration. The visa issue highlights barriers to intra-African mobility, as colonial borders and visa requirements hinder trade and travel. Ghana's visa-free policy for African passport holders is a step toward unity, aligning with the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. Sahel Alliance Model. Traoré's leadership in the Alliance of Sahel States, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, offers a blueprint for regional blocs rejecting Western influence, promoting economic and security cooperation. This could inspire other regions to form similar alliances. Implications for Pan-Africanism, rejection of colonial legacies. The visa scandal underscores how colonial borders and Western policies continue to divide Africa. Pan-Africanism, rooted in figures like Kwame Nkrumah, gains momentum as leaders like Hichilema and Traoré challenge these structures. Economic sovereignty. Hichilema's demand aligns with Traoré's push for resource control and debt-free development, echoing Nkrumah's vision of a united, self-reliant Africa. This could drive policies like a Sahel currency to replace the CFA franc. Diaspora inclusion. Pan-Africanism includes African diasporas affected by slavery and migration. Traoré's appeal among African Americans and Black Britons, amplified by social media, strengthens global solidarity. Youth and women's role. Young Africans, vocal about visa rejections online, and women's movements, like those led by Audley Moore, are reshaping Pan-Africanism to be inclusive and dynamic. Challenges. Geopolitical divisions. The Sahel alliances break from ECOWAS risks, splitting West Africa between pro-Western and anti-imperialist blocs, complicating unity. Security threats. Ongoing. Insurgencies in the Sahel divert resources from unity-focused initiatives, testing leaders' ability to deliver. Implementation barriers. Visa reform and regional integration require coordination across 54 nations, facing bureaucratic and political resistance. The scandal is a catalyst for Pan-Africanism, uniting leaders and citizens in demanding fairness and fostering regional cooperation. But sustained progress depends on overcoming internal divisions and external pressures. The rising influence of Captain Ibrahim Traoré and leaders rejecting Western pressure. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's 37-year-old military leader, is a pivotal figure in Africa's shift towards sovereignty and anti-imperialism, inspiring leaders like Hichilema and others rejecting Western pressure. His influence, amplified by social media and regional alliances, is reshaping African leadership. Traoré's rising influence. Anti-imperialist stance. Traoré's rejection of IMF, World Bank, and French influence, coupled with his expulsion of French troops in 2023, positions him as a champion of African sovereignty. His 2023 Russia-Africa summit speech, urging leaders to resist Western puppeteers, resonated widely. Sahel Alliance leadership. Traoré's formation of the Alliance of Sahel States with Mali and Niger promotes regional self-reliance, challenging ECOWAS and Western-backed institutions. This bloc aims for a new currency to replace the CFA franc, seen as a colonial relic. Social media appeal. Traoré's image as a fearless reformer is amplified by viral content, some driven by Russian propaganda, portraying him as a modern Thomas Sankara. His appeal extends to African diasporas and global South audiences, though disinformation risks exaggerating his achievements. Policy actions. Traoré's nationalization of gold resources and reported housing initiatives, e.g., 50,000 homes, reflect a focus on economic fairness and self-reliance, inspiring other leaders to renegotiate exploitative contracts. Other leaders rejecting Western pressure. Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema. His demand for visa fee refunds aligns with Traoré's defiance. Framing Western policies as exploitative. Hichilema's stance strengthens Zambia's role in Pan-African advocacy. Mali and Niger's junta leaders. These leaders, part of the Sahel Alliance, echo Traoré's rejection of Western influence, aligning with Russia and prioritizing regional security and economic cooperation. Ghana's Nana Akufo-Addo. His visa-free policy for African passport holders and push for reparations reflect a broader trend of asserting African agency, inspired by figures like Traoré. Implications for African leadership. Generational shift. Traoré's youth and military background challenge older, Western-aligned leaders, pressuring them to adopt bolder reforms or risk obsolescence. Risks of authoritarianism. Military rule in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger raises concerns about democratic backsliding, despite popular support. Traoré's crackdowns on dissent highlight this tension. Global realignment. The shift toward Russia and China, as seen in Traoré's alliances, reflects a broader African pivot away from Western dominance, fueled by grievances like the visa scandal. Challenges. Security crises. Traoré's failure to quell Burkina Faso's insurgency, with 40% of territory uncontrolled, undermines his narrative of strength. Disinformation risks. Exaggerated claims about Traoré's achievements, spread by Russian propaganda, could erode credibility if unmet. Economic isolation. Rejecting Western institutions risks trade and aid losses, requiring robust domestic alternatives to sustain growth. Traoré's influence is driving a new wave of African leadership focused on sovereignty, but its success depends on delivering tangible results and navigating global tensions. This is not just about one man. It's about a continent reclaiming its power. The visa rejection scandal, Hichilema's refund demand, and Traoré's leadership are part of a broader African movement to reclaim economic, political, and cultural power. This is evident in economic assertiveness. Leaders like Hichilema and Traoré challenge exploitative systems, from visa fees to resource contracts, prioritizing African wealth for Africans. Pan-African solidarity. The Sahel Alliance and calls for visa reform signal a unified push against colonial legacies, echoing historical figures like Nkrumah and Sankara. Global influence. Africa's growing economic power, 11 of the 20 fastest growing economies, and geopolitical realignment toward Russia and China position the continent as a formidable player. Youth and diaspora engagement. Social media and diaspora support amplify this movement, making it a global call for justice and self-determination. This movement faces challenges, security threats, economic volatility, and internal divisions, but it marks a pivotal moment in Africa's quest for sovereignty and equality. Conclusion. The visa rejection scandal, costing Africa $67.5 million in 2024, exposes systemic inequities in global mobility, prompting Zambian President Hichilema to demand refunds and fueling Pan-African calls for fairness. This issue strains EU and UK relations, highlighting their declining influence as Africa pivots toward non-Western powers. Traoré's anti-imperialist leadership, alongside Hichilema's advocacy, is reinvigorating Pan-Africanism, fostering regional unity, and challenging older leaders to adapt. This is not just about individuals, but a continent asserting its power, though success hinges on overcoming security, economic, and governance hurdles. If you'd like additional artifacts, e.g., a policy brief or a chart on visa rejection rates, please let me know.